Interestingly, life is not always about how strong you are, how big you are, how powerful you are. There will come a time you will need, in fact, you will always need somebody that's smaller than you, somebody that's weaker than you. Let's watch this. I'm going to make a comment right later.
I am happy that we're having this debate and talking about the continent of Africa. And if we do that, we've got to listen to the I can just recall, and sometimes many of my colleagues, especially on the other side of the aisle, argue that we don't get the votes we need at times in the UN from African countries.
Okay, so this is a Congress people of the Congress of the United States of America, sitting and having a discussion. As you know, the US has lost power in many, many ways, has lost a lot of credibility amongst some of the weaker country, quote unquote weaker country. And this man is explaining why, how we came to that, what actually happened. America used to be this very powerful country that was listened to by many other countries. Why has the attitude of Africa changed toward the United States of America? Let's watch.
I recall when we were trying to get votes in regards to Russia's illegal invasion into Ukraine. And I had to call African ambassadors. And they said, now you're calling me? We haven't heard from the United States for a while. Now you want something from me? We've been asking for assistance in regards to security. And then I watched to see what was taking place when we look at our diplomacy. It was over 2 decades it took before in the 117th Congress we passed a state authorization bill. And had to do that through the NDAA as opposed to saying we're going to stand strongly on diplomacy. Guess what China did during that period of time? They doubled their diplomacy budget. Guess what else is happening? For the first time, China has more consulates than the United States of America. General Kelly said either we do and get engaged in more diplomacy or you're going to have to spend more money on bullets. We have an opportunity to engage and listen to allies and work with our allies. Many allies who have more and should have more responsibility on the continent because they colonized it, working with us collectively to try to make sure that the Chinas and the Russias of the world are not invested and we are invested and we are not. It's our challenge. And I hope that when we get past this debate, you'll be able to have another one. And I look forward to doing it particularly in our committee so that we can figure out collectively together, as Ms. Ilhan said, how we can work together and listen to make sure that we have an overall strategy. And I say this in regards to both parties. I say this to the administration, who should be doing more on the continent of Africa. So yes, this is not a partisan debate. This is an American debate. This is an opportunity to have attention to a continent that is the fastest growing and the youngest on this planet, that we have ignored for far too long. We have to wake up and do more for the continent of Africa and figure it out, diplomacy. Figure out how we can help protect them from being victimized by terrorism. Figure out how we can strengthen institutions. We've got a lot of work to do. Figure out how do we reauthorize AGOA.
So as you can see, obviously he's spitting the truth here, some fiery truth about what's happening in the world. The world is turning to a position where people want to look after themselves now. As usual, usually when somebody acts too strong to all these, peers, he tends to become like a bully. That's what happens. When in school, somebody pushes everybody, he pushes his weight around, what happens? They call him a bully. And it comes a time where people get together and say, you know what, enough is enough. We can't handle this anymore. We need to find a way to actually find a solution to you. You are the threat. You are the problem here. It's not everybody else. This is what's happening organically with America, unfortunately. Why? Because it's maybe by mistake, maybe by lack of understanding where other people are standing. It's very sad, and to see that America has lost the power that it had. I mean, America was a place where people dreamt about. People dreamt of the US. I used to dream about the United States of America. I mean, who am I to be blamed? Batman is American. Superman is American. All these superstars are Americans. You expect great things from America. But unfortunately, on the ground, we see what's happening is very, very different. Now, listen to this other person that says, why has China gained so much terrain on the African continent? Why was it so difficult for Africans to line up with the United States when it came time to vote against Russia with regard to Ukraine? Because a lot of African countries refuse to line up with the Western countries. They refuse, in fact, not because they had any interest, but because they felt like they won't be complied or forced to make a decision they do not naturally feel. Russia has never really disturbed anybody within the African continent. If you look at history, the people that came and colonized and pauperized and stole and took away from African continent were mostly Western countries. Therefore, naturally, what would you choose between the person or the people that have done you wrong in the past and somebody who has never done you anything wrong in the past? Somebody, in fact, that has helped you fight colonialism in some point in time. That's what Russia did with South Africans who were colonized and pressed until 1994. And at that time, Russia sent weapons to the African nationals to fight for their freedom. You're going to watch this person, another member of Congress, of the American Congress, that comes very clearly about more stuff. He speaks very clearly about what's happening. He said, while we busy condemning Africa, look at China. China is investing. China is proposing. China is offering. Listen to this.
We have built a foreign policy of hectoring and moralizing and lecturing countries that don't want anything to do with it. The Chinese have a foreign policy of building roads and bridges and feeding poor people.
The Chinese have a policy of building roads, feeding people. The Chinese people have built the railways in Kenya, in Ethiopia, and many other African countries. I mean, look at these countries. Kenya railway is spot on. It's good. Okay, it's not whatever, but it's great. It's functional. From Nairobi to Mombasa, you can go within hours, no issues. It was built by who? By Chinese. Look at Ethiopia, same thing. They can now work accordingly. They can move their goods and whatever to, it's by Chinese. I mean, I'm not saying China is much better. I'm not saying China is the way to go, because at the end of the day, Africans do not want to be colonized by anybody, whether it's the Western or the Eastern. We don't want that. But out of the two negatives, you have to choose the lesser negative of the two. Doesn't it make sense? Absolutely.
And I think that we should pursue a foreign policy, a diplomacy of respect, and a foreign policy that is not rooted in moralizing. It's rooted in the national interest of this country.
A foreign policy that is not rooted in moralizing and condemning other countries. Like very recently, Kamala Harris came to Africa, and other people, for that matter, trying to enforce liberal mentality within African community, saying you need to accept these sort of marriages that are not necessarily, you know what I'm talking about, that are not necessarily accepted in Africa. You can't go to somebody's house and tell them how to live. That's not how you create friends. You need to let your friends live the way they live. If it doesn't directly bother you, that is none of your business. Yeah, you don't have to mingle into their personal issues, their personal way of life. The same way you don't do with Arab countries, don't do with Africa. I mean, we all know Saudi Arabia does not accept marriages within the same, you know what I'm trying to say. But nobody bothers Saudi Arabia. Nobody gives them time frame. You need to do this or else we're going to do that. Or else we're going to take away our aid like they've done with Uganda. The US diplomats are really trying hard to change things. They're really trying hard to call on their people to change their way of being, their international relation with other countries. You can be as strong as you like, but you can never be too strong to suffice yourself. The bottom line is everybody needs somebody. At some point in life, you're going to need people that are weaker than you, people that are not as big as you. That's just the way life is. Listen to this lady. Her name is Akende Bemba. She's a director of the Pan-Africanism today.
If you look at the Western and the imperialist countries, they come with their own interests. The vice president of the US came to Zambia, landed at a Chinese-built airport in Zambia, moved on a Chinese-built road in Zambia. The venue of this summit was actually a gift to Zambia by the Chinese government. And that was where the Summit for Democracy was held, in Zambia.
She said very clearly, Kamala Harris came to Zambia using an airport that was built by Chinese nationals, using infrastructure built by Chinese nationals, probably sleeping in a hotel that was built by Chinese nationals, then telling Zambians, you know what, stay away from Chinese, be careful, they're not here for good. That's very paradoxical, isn't it? In the meantime, what has the US policy done for Zambia? At least not as much as the Chinese people are doing. And I'm not saying China is great, that's not what I'm saying. Obviously, you need to have limitation, you need to have freedom. It's not about leaving the West to go to China and be in prison in China. That's not what you want. And that's a direction that Zambia needs to be very careful of. It's about being able to negotiate good deals for yourself, good agreement for your people, so you can have a certain level of independence, so you can do your own things. It's not just about bringing in the Chinese to build the road and infrastructure. It's about learning the skills from the Chinese so your own people can be free and able to sustain themselves. God bless.